All right, let's talk about this other game.
Don't say it like that. That's
Eagles
not
fans should be
it.
excited. I mean, yeah, look, fans of teams love dominant games, especially against division rivals.
Yeah.
It's tough to beat a team 3 times.
It is.
Eagles 38, Giants 7. Dominant from start to finish.
Yeah.
By the Eagles.
Which kind of felt like, I mean, it's just if you forget the second game they played and you just went back to the first one. Even
with all the Giants' injuries in that game. This is what the teams are.
Right.
The Eagles are a better team than the Giants. This is what I was trying to say. Again, I haven't been right very often.
No.
This year in particular. But the wild card hype, the last thing you saw, the Jags, the Giants, great win against the Vikings, right? And it's like, and it's so fun. It's so easy to see, this wild card team. This is the team of destiny. It's going to happen. And we were playing that game, right? The 07 Giants and the 96 Jags were playing that game. But I reminded people, don't get too caught up in the wild card hype because the teams that have byes or the 1 and 2 seeds are still really, really good teams. And I thought the Eagles and Chiefs really showed that, especially right at the beginning of the game where both teams just go down the field and score.
I mean, I got to say, a large portion of this game, I was left thinking, just how bad is that Vikings defense?
Sure.
Like, they were annihilated by the Giants offense that is getting murdered by the Philadelphia defense here. Like, it was insane. They just got absolutely destroyed. The Eagles defensive line was wrecking shop again. They did that most of the season. Their sack rate this year is crazy. They've been a really good pass rush team, but they have a lower pressure rate than Dallas does, but they have a sack rate that's way higher, which I think probably tells you a lot about how important the secondary is and how much that, there's a symbiosis there, right? The secondary works in tandem with the pass rush, and if you only have one of them, it's never going to look as good as it should, which is in part why Myles Garrett has an incredibly high PFF grade, an incredibly high pass rush win rate, a ton of those BD blocks that we talk about, those wins that don't get to become pressure, because if the secondary stinks, if they're giving up plays, it doesn't matter. The ball's coming out and they're getting beat. The Cowboys are beating everybody in terms of pressure rate, but their secondary is not able to do what the Eagles are because they don't have the combination of James Bradbury and Darius Slay and everything else that the Eagles can bring to the table. So they're the team with the insane sack rate, and they were getting home in this game.
Yeah, it was just dominant from start to finish. The Eagles, they've looked like the best team in the league for most of the season, right? There was a little bit of a lull down the stretch. Gardner Minshew started 2 games, and even the Cowboys game was close. They got beat up pretty bad by the Saints. But this has been the best team in the league, with my answer being they're going to do it in different ways, right? There was a point late in the game, and I hate this so much, where it looked like A.J. Brown was being consoled a little bit for something. So I'm not going to project what it was. But
Okay.
Could it be that he only had 3 catches for 22 yards, or was it a certain play, or was it whatever? But there were games this year where A.J. Brown was the difference. I still will reiterate, I believe A.J. Brown was the biggest, most impactful move on draft night, round 1. The Eagles trading for him and paying him all that money. He is one of the most transformative players in the NFL this year. I got to go back and do the research, but I think a lot of the Ryan Tannehill resurgence for 3 years, you do the Witten without A.J. Brown, right? Witten without Philly, cheesesteak people. Witt, A.J. Brown, really, really good. Without, pretty average. And Jalen Hurts goes from pretty average to really good with A.J. Brown. He had 3 catches for 22 yards. Eagles scored 38. Because this particular week, they had Devontae Smith, who's just so good after the catch, man. I'll talk about him in a minute. Dallas Goedert. They had the run game, which was unstoppable. Jalen Hurts facilitating the whole thing. They didn't need A.J. Brown to score 38 points in this game. Now, next week, could be A.J. Brown, 10 catches for $150, and that's the reason why they win. But that's one of the reasons why I think this Eagles team is so good.
Yeah, I mean, this was the one that I sort of had the least to say about because it was just simple. I mean, the Eagles dominated both sides of the ball. It's really all there is to it. Their defense was stuffing that Giants offense without too many problems. The other side of the ball, that was kind of interesting because pre-game, Jalen Hurts told Pam Oliver that he's nowhere near 100%, was the words he used. You're like, ooh. he was off the injury report all week. And all of a sudden it's like, actually, I'm not even close to 100%. That's not great. He looked fine like that. I don't know if that was just what you say before a playoff game in case you stink. And you're like, it was the shoulder. I told you that before the game. But he looked good. But Lane Johnson was also coming back. And I didn't realize that his injury was as severe as it is. He's coming back not in a I'm fixed way, but in a I need surgery and I can just get through the pain for a few weeks and then have the surgery. So apparently Cam Jordan has had this before and played through it. And Lane Johnson talked to him about how best to manage it, what it's going to be exactly like. It's some sort of, some groin injury
like
that's going to require
type thing. Or
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's an injury to his groin that's going to require surgery. The specifics of which I don't know. But he talked to Cam Jordan, who was basically saying it's going to be agony every play. And you just have to, it's just a pain thing. You just have to get through it. He was like, oh, great, sweet. And you could see, there were a couple of plays like early in the game where he's got to catch a bull rush or whatever. And you're like, dude, whatever about containing your own 300-pound frame, having to catch a 270-pound dude who's running at you in addition to your own 300-pound frame on your bangy groin. That's not fun. So kudos to him for A, going out there, gutting it out, B, playing as well as he did, gutting it out. And now hopefully he holds up for the rest of their games because, Lane Johnson makes a huge difference to that group. And we just saw that, again, evidence that the Eagles have the best offensive line in the NFL. They have all season long. When they've got their 5 starters out there, they destroy people. And Dexter Lawrence in particular, you go back a week against Minnesota, you can argue Dexter Lawrence was the difference in that game. He destroyed Minnesota's interior offensive line. They could not block him late on at all. He had a ton of pressure in that game, particularly late when everything was on the line. He didn't have any pressures in this game. Our guy, Dave Solfaro, said that was the first time this season he's had 0 pressures. They eliminated him completely, essentially, from the game. As a pass rusher and as a run defender, he wasn't as big. He wasn't a huge impact either. There's that great play where Jason Kelsey, was seen pancaking a dude. They just destroyed in the run game as well.
Yeah, they really did, man.
That play, by the way,
as fun as
is beautiful.
As fun as Dexter Lawrence was last week, and this even just the entire defensive front and the story of Brian Daboll, them overachieving this year and everything. They were overmatched.
Yeah, that play by Kelsey is beautiful, by the way, because everyone is sort of going, look at the power he shows here to basically toss the guy to the side. But it was the quickness of thought that was most impressive because, he's going. It's a zone play to that side. He's trying to, I think it's a zone play. He's trying to reach, block the guy, get in front of him. He realizes quite early on the play that he's never going to quite get there to get all the way around him and cut him off. So he sort of goes, well, if I'm not going to get there, I'm going to immediately swing back the other side and just drive him forward. And that sort of change in mind midway through the play and pivot to what he was planning on doing just completely catches the defensive tackle off guard, and he ends up getting launched for a complete ride. But in the space of a split second, Kelsey goes from trying to execute what he's normally able to do and very good at, realizing he's not going to quite get there, changing his mind and pivoting completely to a different plan, which results in completely pancaking the dude who wasn't able to, follow the same split-second calculations at the same time and just ends up getting tossed to a heap on the floor. And then either way, Kelsey's block ends up being the one that opens a giant lane for the running back.
Yeah, Kelsey's awesome, man.
That's why he's legitimately got a Hall of Fame, resume building.
Because he's done it. Kelsey, my favorite thing about Kelsey, Jason, when he's out in space, looks like a linebacker.
Right.
The fact that he's so undersized and then does stuff like you're saying that you don't see on the football field.
And this was it's one of the sort of rare instances where he didn't quite get it done with his athleticism. Normally you see him get all the way around the defensive tackle, seal him off, and that's the play you're talking about, right? It's wow, that athleticism, that kind of movement skills, the speed of a linebacker. And this time it's he didn't quite get there, but his adjustment for not quite getting there ended up being even more effective than the block that he was trying to execute in the first place.
So the other thing I wanted to note, right? So early in the game, Eagles go up. It's 7-0. Giants go for it on 4th and 8. So they're coming back. It's 4th and 8 on the Eagles 40. And this wasn't I was actually watching on mute for a big part of the time. I don't know if any of this stuff was criticized or any of that, but it's pretty obvious go for it situation. It's a low percentage, low conversion rate on fourth and 8.
Which commentary team was this? Was this Moose?
This was with Moose, yeah.
Yeah.
So I have no idea if this was being criticized or whatever it may have been. They had just gotten sacked on 3rd and 3. So they made it 4th and 8. And, I talk about this all the time. When you move backwards into 4th down, it feels like the coach is far more likely to punt or make a different decision, right? Because you just had a negative play. But they go for it on 4th and 8. Daniel Jones gets sacked, couldn't get rid of the ball by Hassan Reddick. And that leads to a short field for Philly, who just, goes right down, scores the second touchdown to make it 14-0. This is the other side of go for it decisions. When it doesn't work, you do lose a lot of win probability in these plays, right? You lose a significant amount, especially when you lose 8 yards on the play, when you get sacked. And so Philly takes over at their own 48 coming out of that. I'm not criticizing the decision necessarily, but we talk a lot of times through the lens of you have to go for this because if you get it, here are the things that are going to happen. The problem, and a lot of times we say you have to go for this in the tight red zone because if you don't get it, the other team has to go a long field or whatever. But this is one of those in-between situations, which, going for it on the 40 is pretty common historically in the NFL. But this was a tough one for the Giants, right? They lose possession of the ball, of course. Give it to Philly at the 48. You're already overmatched. And Philly goes down, goes up 14-0, and they're off to the races for the blowout. So it was a pivotal play in the game that I think was the right decision to go for it on 4th and 8. But when you don't get it, you saw the inherent risk on the other side. It's a really short field for Philly, and they make it 14-0 pretty quickly. But then you had at the end of the game very curious decisions, right? Down 28-7, the Giants punt early 4th quarter on their own 42, and there was another one later. There was 2 punts in there, which felt like giving up for a playoff game.
Yeah.
Even though you're overmatched offensively, like your only chance to score is essentially with the ball. Like you're basically hoping for a fumble from the Eagles at that point.
I think early in the game, the Giants sort of felt like, because they're coming off a game a week ago where their offense looked amazing, right? And some of the takes coming out of that game.
I will not shave my head if we get to 500 likes, but we can, I'd like to get 500 likes. We'll see how it goes.
Some of the takes coming out of last week's game were pretty out there, right?
Oh, I want to get to that.
Even forgetting the Daniel Jones thing, like there was a lot of crazy stuff being talked about this Giants offense. And again, like I'm only marginally better than you are this year in terms of saying things that aren't wrong. You've been nuts. You haven't been right a lot, I haven't been right a lot either, but I've been right a lot more than you. So I was at least saying, look, you can't divorce this from the defense that they were facing, which has been horrendous. Minnesota's defense has been a joke. So of course this Giants offense was going to look good. But from their point of view, like they're coming out of that game. Jones had maybe the best game of his career. The offense looked great. Like they're thinking they're in a groove and Brian Daboll should be coach of the year and blah, blah, blah. So early in this game, things haven't gone their way. Philadelphia's looking good. It's 4th and 8. I think you can get in the mindset where they think, oh, we can pick this up and then we can answer and we can get back into that groove, right? This isn't how this game's going to go. We just need to recapture what was there last week. I don't think they sort of foresaw like the way this game was going to go, which is we're just massively overmatched and we're not going to be able to hang with this.
I think Greg Rosenthal again, he had said, I try not to listen to too much other NFL analysis so I don't skew my own perception. I want to come up with fresh takes here, with original stuff, even if I'm completely wrong. But I thought Greg did a good job saying that this year reminds him of Sean McDermott and the Bills making the playoffs with Tyrod Taylor in their first year. So 2017, it was the year before they drafted Josh Allen.
Tyrod almost got a play in this game. Do you see that?
Almost.
Yeah. Came in. He was on the field.
Yeah.
And then they were like, no, come.
We don't need you.
Back to the sideline.
Danny Dimes is okay.
He found his contact. Get back.
But he likened it to that year, which is like the Bills weren't going to do anything in the playoffs that year. But, there's a coaching staff that kind of overachieved and just kind of laid the groundwork for the future. And I think that's a fair assessment of the Giants this year. Like they had no business being in the playoffs this year, given the talent on that team. But they found a way. They tapped into Daniel Jones as a runner. They, schemed it up defensively and, created variance and all these things that we've said about them this year. They did it with a depleted receiving core, traded away their first round receiver, Kadarius Toney, who was never on the field for them. Kenny Golladay has more pancakes than touchdowns this year. They're high priced receiver, and they made the playoffs. I think it's a good, successful season for Brian Daboll and the Giants. At the same time, the overreaction, as you said, to not only, will the darling Giants, pull the upset and do this and that, clearly that just didn't come to fruition.
No. I think the last 2 weeks we sort of, I think, found out more or less what we were expecting about both the Giants and the Vikings. Like, these teams overachieved. They did a good job. They made it to the playoffs when, look, nobody was expecting the Vikings to be good this year. The Packers were supposed to walk away with that division, and maybe the Vikings could be the next best team and maybe make the postseason and do a little bit better than the year before. But they weren't expected to be good because they didn't really change anything, right? They overhauled the regime. They got a new head coach and a new GM, but they stayed with basically the same personnel. So for them to win the games that they did was an achievement, but there was no underlying data point that really said this is going to achieve anything once you meet the best teams in the postseason. And then for the Giants, you couldn't even really find underlying data points. It was like, there's nothing here that says this team should be winning the games they are. So at some point, that's probably going to get found out. And they were. The Giants knocked off the Vikings, but then the Giants ran up against Philadelphia, who do look like one of the best teams in the NFL, and they simply were overmatched.
So Daniel Jones ends the game with a 46.7 grade. So I wasn't trying to be mean or anything like that, but I had to pose the question, right? Because I don't like the overreaction stuff. Jones had been very impressive down the stretch. He'd played his best ball from week 13 on. I even cited the stat going into on the podcast. Since week 13, QB2. It was Joe Burrow and Daniel Jones from a grading standpoint. I also said this is statistical malpractice because you don't just pick a random point and say, well, Daniel Jones is the second best quarterback. I was trying to paint the picture, though he's playing well down the stretch. So for the Twitter overreactors or the social media, or just the general overreactors, who last week in a wild card game against a pretty bad Vikings defense said, Daniel Jones just made himself a lot of money. He's a free agent this year, doesn't have the fifth-year option picked up. He's hitting the market. Just made himself a lot of money last week against the Vikings. Has the money been taken away after a poor performance this week? How do you handle it? If you made a lot of money last week, you're saying, hey, we can win a playoff game with Daniel Jones. Does your perception change just a week later when he has his worst game of the season, second worst game of the season, against certainly a much better defense? He's under pressure nonstop. But that's also like part of the point here, right?
This game also won us 2 more bets. Rufus and Nathan Jacobson each had the Giants either making the championship.
Yeah, we had some aggressive Giants bets saying they were going to the NFC Championship and or the Super Bowl.
So chalk up another 2 wins for us.
What did we win? What did these guys bet?
Kudos.
More coffee. Send the coffee beans.
Smugness.
Send us all the coffee. It's great. Do you have any thoughts? Like, what should the Giants, does this, it's really interesting. What should the Giants coaching staff do, right, with Daniel Jones? And we'll plenty of offseason time to talk about it.
I think Daniel Jones is in the fortunate situation of they don't have a very easy path to a much better option,
Right.
So has Daniel Jones really done enough for you to go, that's the guy, let's go with him going forward? No. But what is your alternative? Because you're not picking high in the draft. You don't really, there aren't going to be really free agent quarterbacks that are going to be a massive upgrade unless you're talking about somebody like Tom Brady, who's 127 years old, and that's probably not something you want to sign up to. So do the Giants wish that they picked up his 5th-year option instead of declining it? Yeah. With that being said, they're probably still better off keeping him on a franchise tag, keeping him short term and then seeing what happens. Let's give this another year and see where we go. Because, I don't really see an alternative, right? Do you trade for a Derek Carr? Is that much of an upgrade over Daniel Jones? Probably not, and it's more expensive. So I think just by fortune of circumstance, he's probably their guy next year. But I wouldn't be going, all right, to the table now, negotiating, or what is this $250 million contract going to look like, Daniel?
Yeah.
No.
I completely acknowledge the human element means something in all of this. And I think the Daniel Jones human element is really attractive, right? Like the people at Duke loved him, right? They raved about Daniel Jones.
Mm-hmm.
The Dave Gettleman in his last regime. And there's something to like the consistency that he brings, and they trust him. And everybody seems to love Daniel Jones, just like everybody seems to love Josh Allen, right? I mean, they I don't know, they seem to like him. At the same time, if you're the coaching staff and you're like, hey, we didn't get the best quarterback play this year. We kind of maximized Daniel Jones. We tapped into the legs a little bit. Like,
yeah,
we could do better.
I also,
right? We, as a coaching staff, like Mike Kafka and Dable, like we're going to do better. Give us a little bit better, and we're going to win more games.
There might be no quarterback in the NFL that inspires such deranged week-to-week hyperbole swings than Daniel Jones. I mean, this is a guy who a lot of people coming out, including, a lot of people here, said that he basically couldn't play. He was terrible, had no business being a starter, blah, blah, blah. And then after week one, was it preseason week one or just week one? After one game, people are tweeting apologies. Like, wow, I got that one wrong. Daniel Jones is amazing.
Name him, Dan O.
Dan O was one of such people. There were other people
apologizing.
As well. The Giants, like their official Twitter account, I looked for this and I couldn't find it again. I don't know if they deleted it, but I'm pretty sure their official Twitter account was like coming after people for after that, like week one, being like, well, where are you now? And then people were like writing him off, being like, this guy's garbage. This guy can't play. Daniel Jones stinks. After the Vikings game, it's like, Daniel Jones is amazing. Where are you now? Like, give him some respect. And then now he's back to stinking again. It's like, can we just chart a line of best fit somewhere in the middle here, which is we were probably too low on him coming out. Then he outperformed expectations for a while. Then he declined, and now he's getting better again in a very well-coached offense. But he's still like average.
I nailed it. I still nailed it. He's Nick Foles, but with much better mobility.
And with dramatically less like swings to either extreme.
I thought Daniel Jones would have more of the swings because he was tough. Like he was tough and willing to make difficult throws. But either way, we'll have more Daniel Jones discussion this offseason, I'm sure. But I would say, look, congrats, Giants fans. I thought it was a good season. Be happy about the coaching staff in the future. We thought they nailed the draft with Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal. Mm-hmm. Neal's got some room to grow, but I think, process-wise, I think the Giants are in a good spot to build. But they have a lot of work to do, right? I mean, every year there's 4 or 5 new playoff teams, and going into next year, unless there's a lot of changes and new talent in New York and in Minnesota and some of these other teams, like they're going to be the prime teams that we say, can they actually make it back to the playoffs? Can they actually get better?
There's an interesting discussion going on in the chat right now where Victor has noticed also that you're going bald, like I have. And then Brad has pointed out that this show only has room for one bald host at a time, which is obviously me.
How am I going bald? I'm not going bald.
Well, you're going bald because this is receding backwards. That's how that works.
I've always had a widow's peak.
I swear to God, now that we have some time and resource to put into the PFF NFL show, Tyler, we need to find a clip from 5 years ago where Steve's hairline was back here somewhere, and then just overlay it into like some sort of movie, like a GIF that shows the retreating of his hairline upwards, just to prove to him what's happening.
What do I do to keep it strong? What do I do to maintain it?
Well, can we get like a hymn sponsorship or the Keeps? Who are those people?
What's the best on the market?
Do you think I know? Do I look like a man that's had success in this field?
You're a little late to the party, man. You should have thought about this a few years ago. I'm thinking about it right now. I don't
have the time, money, or inclination to reclaim my lost hair.
Any viewers from 4 or 5 years ago that remember?
That remember your hairline?
Yeah. Like, have you been like, look at Steve going bald?
I don't think
another year more balding.
You can't claim victory just because nobody remembers what it used to look like.
I'm looking for somebody to give some sort of positive reinforcement that's like, no, you've always looked like this.
Oh, I see.
Stop searching your computer, Tyler. I see you moving. Stop. We don't need to search anything right now. It's playoff weekend. We got 1,100 people in here watching. We're trying to get out of here. Stop zooming in on me now.
If you're looking for a positive, you could have like the Greg Olson. Like Greg Olson's hairline went wonky when he was like 25, but then it just stayed there. It never went any further.
But you're telling me this thing's creeping.
Well, yours is, yeah. So I'm not, I don't think
creeping doesn't just stop.
No, I don't think yours is a Greg Olson. Actually, this particular side, there's quite an undercut on this bit. I'm just saying I've been there. I feel your pain. I understand I understand where it's going to go eventually.
What am I going to do when I lose my signature?
I mean, you're going to have to, you can't be one of those guys that keeps that in a ponytail, and it's just getting thinner and thinner up there.
Oh no, that's a bad look.
Really bad.
Especially the way I dress and everything. I just wearing my, high-end sweatpants with the ponytail. Like it's bad news over here. Like if I rock my Hall of Fame jacket everywhere, maybe you kind of pull that off. Distract him with the
bling.
With the blue blazer, Hall of Fame jacket.
Uh-huh.
I'll have to talk to Liz. I'll talk to Liz, my stylist, see if she's got any thoughts.
Do they
because she doesn't want me to lose my hair, she'll lose business.
Right, but therefore, are they going to give you an unvarnished opinion? Like if you say, hey, Liz,
it's more like I want to know the proper
me.
products. I'm not looking for positive reinforcement from Liz. I'm looking for a game plan.
But I don't know if she's going to give you fair, impartial advice. Like if you say, hey, Liz, be honest with me now. Is my hairline receding? She's going to go, no, this is exactly where it's always been. It looks great. Let me just tidy this up. I'll give you some color, darken it down a bit. That'll make it look thicker. I do a couple, and it'll be perfect. She's not going to go, look, this is at least 2 inches further back than when I started working on it a couple of years ago. I don't know what to tell you.
I'm okay with some honesty from Liz if we can get this thing back on track here. So, show's going off the rails here, but it's okay because the last game, was 38-7. Eagles.
Yeah.
From an Eagles perspective here, I'm loving the matchup against the Niners. Niners have an excellent run defense.
I mean, dude, these are now two pretty special looking championship games.
They really are. Whether the Bills or Bengals had won this game, I think we were in the right spot there. Obviously, Dallas was a team that in the right week could look good, but they were far less consistent than the rest of them.
Yeah, you can make an argument that Buffalo and Dallas both deserve to be in that conversation, but I think we have what look like the four best teams in the NFL at this point in the season. I think Buffalo were for a large part of the year, and then they fell off a little bit. They started playing a little bit stranger. Their injuries started to catch up. Dallas blew hot and cold a little bit when they were at their best, absolutely. But I think these are the three most consistent teams in the league, and then Cincinnati, who through the second half of the year have been as good as anybody. So that looks pretty hot.
And 3 out of 4 years the Niners have been in the NFC Championship. Kyle Shanahan's run as the head coach with the Niners, when I used to say when he's had his hand-picked starting quarterback, which was Jimmy Garoppolo for a while, they keep making the NFC Championship. Now he's doing it with 7th-round rookie Brock Purdy, who still doesn't look like the moment's too big for Purdy ever, right? He's still very much in it. And now going up against an Eagles defense, which is strong, right? They've been picked apart a couple times this year, but they've got answers that maybe some other they know how to adjust, and they've got some great coverage players on the outside. That cat and mouse game is going to be awesome. And the Niners run defense against the Eagles rushing offense.
Let's not go crazy out of this week. They scored 19 points. The Eagles have the kind of defense that can do what Dallas did, which is bring pressure, which is stuff them up front, which is force some mistakes. They can cause those kinds of problems. So, that I think will be fascinating.
Am I too biased in favor of Kyle Shanahan? There are many games, and this happened earlier in the year, I was like, look at this offense, it's cooking. And then they scored 17. And I did that with the Dolphins earlier this year at times. I'm like, the Dolphins look great. They scored 16.
And then the Chiefs are legitimately doing with Mahomes what, the comparisons after the first couple of years is this the new Tom Brady, New England Patriots dynasty? And they've been to 5 straight AFC championship games. Now, they haven't got the Super Bowls necessarily that the Patriots do in terms of on pace for. But they're doing that thing of they're in the championship game every year. That's the standard for this team at this point.
Yeah, pretty good. It's impressive. So we're seeing we're seeing the franchise quarterbacks in the AFC completely turn the fortunes of their respective franchises. Mahomes did it years ago, but the Chiefs were the team that could never get over the top. Now they're in the AFC Championship for the 5th straight year, hosting it for the 5th straight year. And the Bengals, who kind of people made fun of them for not spending enough and not having a big enough coaching staff, scouting staff, and they're never going to win because they're happy just making it to the playoffs under Marvin Lewis. And here they are with Joe Burrow, back-to-back AFC championships and perennial contenders. And the other side's different, right? It's not QB driven as much. it's two rookie contract quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy now, going at it in just some very well built teams. So I'm loving these matchups, and of course we'll go through them all on Thursday.